Hi, everyone. This is a continuation of episode 17, famous quotes about Paul involving Robert Eisenman. And in part 5, we're going to examine a video where he discusses Paul, but also in the context of James. And it's all about Acts 21. So he is going to say this is one of the one things you can absolutely know is historical because of the context. So when this is recorded in Acts 21 about Paul, and then the Hazariah, as I put it, where everyone goes crazy that Paul showed up with a person who's defiled the temple, Trophimus, and they want to blame him for Trophimus defiling the temple. That's what Eisenman is talking about here. And then he gives you an intro also to James the Just and how important he was and why he was killed and persecuted. And you can see that full context is meaningful because it tells you how important James was to the Jewish people. So everybody tries to make it look like the community of the church in the early church was anti-Jewish. The Jewish people respected James, the brother of Jesus, so much that they wanted him to do the Yom Kippur service, and that's why he gets killed. And Eisenman says that's by the Herodians, the people who were supporting the high priest's office. You can't get in the way of the high priest who are Herodian appointees. And so that's why James the Just is killed. So he's ultimately killed by the Herodian forces, the same forces of which are in support of Paul. And that happens after this whole episode in Acts 21. So the way that worked out, he's explaining to you this. These things happen because they're so exactly what you would expect at the time and the details. Okay, so I'm going to let him say it all. So I'm going to jump into his video. I'm going to let him do a little intro of who he is. At the beginning of this interview, he did with somebody else. I'm going to let you see the channel. I hope you would go and subscribe or check out the video there. You see the title and just look it up, and you can listen to the whole video. It was about 57 minutes long, but I only have about 8.5 minutes.
I'm Professor Robert Eisenman, author of a number of books on the Dead Sea Scrolls and early Christianity and the early church. For instance, James, the brother of Jesus, the Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the First Christians, and books like that. But the other thing is that these scrolls give you a picture of what the Jamesian community probably looked like. I mean, we have this character that pops up in early church literature and we don't understand it. Everywhere we hear about Eusebius in the 4th century, Hippolytus in the 2nd or 3rd, Jerome in the 5th, we start hearing about this person called James the Just. Well, who is James the Just? James Justus, Justus, that's Latin. It goes back to dikaios in Greek, righteous, and Zadik in Hebrew. James the Tzaddik. James the Tzaddik. When I go to the Dead Sea Scrolls, I can find out who the Tzaddik was, because the scrolls are all centered around the idea of Zadokite, Zedek, righteousness, Zadik. And their leader is known as the teacher of righteousness, the Moreh HaTzedek. And where do they get the Moreh HaTzedek from, the teacher of righteousness? They take biblical passages, and everywhere the word Zadik appears that is convenient for them, they interpret in terms of something the teacher of righteousness was doing. So in the text, he's the Tzaddik. In the interpretation of the text, he's the teacher of righteousness. And what is James? The teacher of righteousness in the Christian literature. And so this began to gel for me. Oh, and by the way, one last thing. As I said at the end of my James book, who and whatever James was, it had to be, so was Jesus. And I don't think James and Jesus would have differed that much from each other. I don't think that's the way things happened. And this is the problem. The believer is not on the level of being able to determine what is authentic and what isn't authentic. This is even scholars don't agree with each other on this and attack each other, insult each other where this is concerned, and have a very low opinion of each other in this regard. So it's an unpleasant activity to find what is authentic and what isn't authentic. And that's where common sense comes into play. To my mind, common sense comes into play. So I start with a few passages. Even the one you mentioned, the Gospel of Thomas, is attractive, but I'm not sure it's reliable. I start with a few passages that I know are reliable, like the passage I told you about from Acts 21:21. It is so mind-boggling and so brutally direct that you can't imagine someone created it. And besides that, what transpires thereafter, Paul does go into the temple. That shows that he is not someone who has very deep-seated adherence to a belief system that he's going to follow absolutely if it doesn't serve his purposes. It serves his purposes here to ingratiate himself to James and appear like he's doing what a follower of James is supposed to do. But the people in the temple who know him better start shrieking and yelling, even in Acts. This is the man who teaches against us here, everywhere in Asia, and all these, and they yell and shriek, and that, is an authentically accurate picture of what was going on, and it creates a riot. And they take him out and throw him out, and it said, and barred the door behind him. That's actually one of the phrases in one of the scrolls, the Damascus document, I think, or the Habakkuk Pesher meaning interpretation. So these are to my mind things that really hit you hard and are probably correct. The point being there is that they have a riot. They don't kill him, but they throw Paul out of the temple. They would have been willing to kill him because they know he's a lawbreaker. They know he's bringing non-believers who are lawbreakers into the temple, and I don't agree with them. They're not. I don't say the temple goers are nice people. I don't say that they're perfect. They're zealots. They're zealous. If I go into the temple today, religious people in the Machne Yehuda area of Jerusalem would maybe attack me. These people are zealots. Okay, they're zealots. We know what zealots are like, but that's authentic picture. But the point is that how does Paul survive? He pulls out a Roman passport, if you want, citizenship. Do you do this to Roman citizens? And then the Roman soldiers who are on watch on the ramparts come down and rescue him and escort him, a protective escort, down to Caesarea on his way to Rome. He does then appear before the governor and so on. That's all authentic material. That's authentic historical material. That is accurate. That's how he gets to Rome finally. He's been there probably before, but that's how he's saved. Romans save him. And he's saved because he's an Herodian, because he's got a Roman citizenship. Now, that's not my prophet. That's not my prophet. So right away, I take the Pauline corpus and set it aside, good for historical purposes, but not for spiritual enlightenment for me. I'm not having a Herodian teacher. I think Herod is a monster. Herod, his ancestor. Herod did everything he could to destroy the Jewish people. Herod destroyed the Maccabean family. Herod undermined the Maccabean legacy. And the scrolls are doing everything they can, not necessarily restore the Maccabees, but to restore the legacy. So as someone from a Jewish background, even my rabbinic friends don't agree with me. I mean, Christians agree with me more than my rabbinic friends, because Christians know that I'm saying something that relates to what they know too, that this James character, who is a brother of their Messiah, Lord, whatever, was a very important figure in the first century early church and came to a negative end, was martyred in some way, and so on and so forth, and was turned over. He was turned over by the rabbinate and the Herodian priestly establishment for stoning, supposedly. You know why? And this is so crazy, because he apparently went into the inner sanctum of the temple. I think it's in Josephus. Went into the inner sanctum of the temple, which only the high priest on Yom Kippur was supposed to do, and asked forgiveness on the part of the whole people, so that he was considered by the opposition Sadducees as the authentic high priest. And that to me starts to make so much sense. I know to the average person, I say, what the heck is Eisenman ranting about? It makes so much sense that I'm not saying it's going to help your belief, but it makes so much sense that it helps my sense of history.
So what was Eisenman talking about? Paul being an Herodian, and he wouldn't want him to be a spiritual teacher of his. The Herodians are an evil ruling family of that region, appointed and anointed by the Romans. Well, he refers or alludes to Romans 16, verse 11, where Paul says to the Romans, to one who's in their midst, a person named Herodion, he says, "Salute Herodion, my kinsman, my relative, greet them that be of the household of Narcissus, which are in the Lord." So Herodion means in Greek, little Herod. So this is a way that the Herodian family would refer to each other, and they were always using as the prefix to their name the word Herod, and that was a giveaway. And then in Acts 13, verse 1, now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, who had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul. So there's your proof that Paul was a childhood friend of Herod the Tetrarch, Herod Antipas, the very Herod who sent Jesus back to Pilate to have him executed. So this is the connections that for Eisenman is just a bridge too far. He admires James, and he can see he's fighting for the historic Judaism. So, and instead of him being deemed an enemy of the Jewish people, he was definitely on their side to remember the Maccabeans and all of that, and he's trying to restore that and trying to bring back the true anointed high priest who would intercede for the people, and the people rejected the Herodian appointee because all the high priests were appointed by Herod. So this was why they rejected their own high priest, and that's all explained in Josephus's work. Let me show you one more thing. Now, he referred to Acts 21. This is a passage that I think every Christian, whether you're on the Paul side or you're the side that questions Paul, you have to know this passage because it's a dead giveaway about what's going on in this picture, in this case. And this is an NIV, so I'm just going to read this to you. So in case you haven't had time to ever listen to it, I'll try to say it slowly and then give some explanations as I go along. Paul's arrival at Jerusalem. So Paul is taking a trip for the holidays, if you will, back to Jerusalem. The Holy Spirit told him not to make this trip, by the way, and he refused. And even the prophet Agabus came out, and several other prophets came out and told Paul, "Don't go, don't go." And he said, "My spirit tells me I have to go." That's just another thing that just think about this. God's Holy Spirit was trying to tell him through all these other people, but he refused to listen. And then you're going to see the temple gets defiled by him taking his friend Trophimus into the city, and Trophimus wanders into the temple and defiles it. But that's a whole nother sub story here. Paul's arrival at Jerusalem. When we arrived at Jerusalem, the brothers and sisters received us warmly. The next day, Paul and the rest of us went to see James. Who is James? James is the Bishop of Jerusalem. He is also the brother of Jesus. And as tradition goes, as even the Gospel of Thomas has it, Jesus told the 12 to follow James when Jesus departs. And all the elders were present. Paul greeted them and reported in detail what God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. When they heard this, they praised God. So when James and all the others present heard all this success that Paul was having, they praised God for that. Then they said to Paul, "You see, brother, how many tens of thousands," it's translated by a mistake, I hope, by the NIV, as thousands, when the word myriads is the numeral 10,000 in Greek. So it has to be translated 10,000s, many 10,000s of Jews have believed. And since the first two sermons, chapter Acts 2 and Acts 3 combined, had 8,000 people come to Christ, it seems pretty much 20 years later, which this is, many tens of thousands is not out of the question. Let's continue. And all of them are zealous for the law. So what is James upholding as the standard amongst the believers in Christ? They have to be zealous for the law. So you have a completely different view of Paul when you read his epistles. He's not in that camp. But watch what he does and how he behaves here. That's why Eisenman says this is how you know this is all true. The confluence of competing narratives that Paul tries to give in his epistles versus what you're going to see here in the book of Acts. They, the Jews who've come, to the city, have been informed that you teach all the Jews who live among the Gentiles to apostatize from Moses. Now, the NIV translates it to turn away from Moses. The word apostasy is literally away. The first part is a prefix meaning away, and the other part is to turn. So to turn away. But why not use the word apostasy? Because they don't want you to know how serious a crime he's bringing up. Apostasy is a death penalty under the law of Moses. So just so you know, so it's not a little trivial thing that James is bringing up to him. That's in Deuteronomy 13, 1-5, in particular, verse 5 and verse 10, the death penalty, telling them not to circumcise their children. So Paul is being told that by James that we've heard rumors, everybody's heard rumors that you teach against the law and you've apostatized against Moses. And you tell them not even to circumcise their children and obey our customs. And of course, that's true, because what did Paul say about Jew or Gentile? He says there's no more Jew or Gentile. If there's no more Jew, there's no more legal necessity to circumcise their children, because there's no more ethnic group called the Jews, the people who are came out of Judea, or the heir to the tribe of Judah. Verse 22, what shall we do? They will certainly hear that you have come. So do what we tell you. Did he give him a choice? No. So James is demanding this of Paul because this is such a serious charge. It has to be immediately addressed and dispelled. How are we going to dispel this, Paul? He says this, what shall we do? They will certainly hear that you have come. So do what we tell you. There are 4 men with us who have made a vow, and it's a Nazirite vow, as you'll see. Take these men, join in their purification rites. So take the same vow and pay their expenses. There were costs. So they can have their heads shaved. That's part of the Nazirite vow in Numbers chapter 6 of the Torah. Then everyone will know there is no truth in these reports about you, but that you yourself are living in obedience to the law. What is James expecting of Paul? Nothing less than when his brother Jesus had said as well. There's no mistaking what's the command here. As for the Gentile believers, we have written to them. Now, this is interesting. Why does he bring up the Acts 15 conference, which is several years earlier? As for the Gentile believers, we have written to them about our decision that they should abstain from food sacrificed to idols, from blood, that means don't eat meat with the blood in it, from the meat of strangled animals, and from sexual immorality. Well, yeah. So that's just a hint that there's something wrong, that they've got wind of something that Paul has said or done that makes them wonder if he's telling the Gentiles not to follow these rules. And the rumors obviously are confirmed later in time. 1 Corinthians 8 and 1 Corinthians 10, Paul says it's completely okay to eat a meat sacrificed to an idol, because, of course, we know idols are nothing. And, of course, that's not how God looked at it. In Balaam in Revelation 2, Jesus reminds us that Balaam had been a prophet of Christ. He preached the star prophecy of the coming of the Messiah would be signaled by a star in the sky. That's what the Magi were following. That prophecy was alive and well in the beginning of the arrival of Jesus on earth. And that was why they were following the star, those Magi. So, but that Balaam character taught it was okay to eat meat sacrificed to idols. Jesus repeats and reminds us in Revelation chapter 2. And what happened? And Moses had him executed. This is all of this is extremely sensitive issues that he's bringing up to Paul. He's bringing up twice 2 different death penalty issues: the apostasy and teaching it's okay to eat meat sacrificed to idols, which caused even a prophet of Christ, Balaam, at the time of Moses, to be executed for teaching that same thing. So I think that's why James is bringing up both points here. Let's continue. Verse 26, the next day Paul took the men and purified himself along with them. Then he went to the temple to give notice of the date when the days of purification would end and the offering would be made for each of them. Paul is arrested. Verse 27. When the 7 days were nearly over, some Jews from the provinces of Asia saw Paul at the temple. They stirred up the whole crowd and seized him, shouting, fellow Israelites, help us. This is the man who teaches everyone everywhere against our people and our law and this place, the temple. And besides, he has brought Greeks into the temple and defiled his holy place. Who did he bring in that defiled the holy place? Trophimus. Did Paul bring him into the actual place that crossed the middle wall of separation? No, he didn't. That's what Paul's alibi was, and Luke supported that and said, Paul said later that I was doing a ceremonial bath, so he had an alibi for when this happened. But on the other hand, he did bring Trophimus in, and Trophimus was from the city of Ephesus. And go read Ephesians chapter 2, where Paul says the middle wall of separation, which is a wall at the temple that keeps the Gentiles out, which is a sign you can't go past this thing, or it's a death penalty, Trophimus. Well, what do you think happens? Trophimus obviously did that. He crossed the wall, the middle wall of separation. Well, why would he do that? Because there's an instruction by Paul in Ephesians chapter 2 that middle wall of separation has been done away with. It's been abolished. God doesn't care about that barrier anymore. We're all free to enter into the temple to any lengths we want, is the implication. And that's exactly what happened. And the consequence of that was very severe. God, Yahweh said, if any uncircumcised Gentile ever crosses that middle wall of separation, ever enters into my temple, there's a consequence. That's an abomination to my temple, and I will destroy my temple. Within one generation, that temple was taken down by a huge siege of the Romans. So, and then everything was fulfilled as to that prophecy, that basically if you did that, God would then destroy the temple, or make the agency of the Romans be his tools to do that, because that's how sacred it is to God that his temple cannot be defiled that way. So anyway, this is a watershed moment for the Bible in the account in Acts. And Eisenman is saying this is something that is so shocking, so uh, real, that this has to be all accurate. This has to be what really happened. And the only way Paul gets out of this is he pulls out the libellus. It's a document that shows he's a citizen of Rome, and very few people could get that other than people who were connected to the Herodian family, as an example, or anything similar to that, because it was not a long list kept in Caesar's office back in Rome. All right, everybody. Hope this helped you get an even more deeper understanding of Eisenman's views about Paul. He's not someone he would ever trust spiritually with his life, because he knows he's an Herodian. He's part of an evil family. And these people were enemies of James the Just. That's why James had to be killed. The Herodians went after him because he was officiating on Yom Kippur, according to Josephus, a neutral historian, mostly really pro-Roman, a neutral historian, saying the Hedon, Hedon, the Herodian high priest office went after him because they James was treading on the high priest's position. His position was, by tradition, to be the only one who could go in to do the officiating on behalf of the entire nation and seek forgiveness for them. But the people didn't want the high priest to do that because he's an Herodian appointee, a lackey, and they wanted someone they believed was super spiritual, and that was James the Just, the brother of Jesus. So you can just see the Jewish people were totally aligned with, or at least did not feel a great differentiation between the Jesus movement and themselves, and they worked together, and this was a sacred moment where they wanted the right person to do it, and it was James the Just who did the officiating on behalf of the people. But that led to James the Just being killed by, I think the high priest was Ananus. Anyway, okay, so if you want to look that up, you can look it up in Josephus. All right, God bless everybody. Take care. Ciao. Bye.